Look, we know that this has been a rough offseason for the Florida Gators, but there are some winners, and we're going to talk about them here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy Monday. I'm Brandon Olson. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find my written work with Whole Nine Sports and Giants Country of SI.com. And before we get into it, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And like I mentioned, there were some winners from this Florida Gators offseason, which I know fan base, you're not one of them. It's just know that if you're a Florida Gators fan, I promise you're not in the winner section here. We are in the big old fat loser section. But there's a lot of us at least. So you know what? We're in the cool kids group. But when you look at who is actually winners, I've got 5 people that we're going to talk about today that I think are winners from this offseason. And some of them just joined the team. Like the probably biggest winner, this isn't really in an order, but I will say the biggest winner is probably Graham Mertz, right? Graham Mertz at Wisconsin was a perfectly average quarterback. And that was kind of just the expectation for him at that point. He came into Wisconsin with incredibly high hopes. He's the highest rated quarterback commit in Wisconsin history. I think he's the 9th highest commit in Wisconsin football history. But now he is a Florida Gator. He has fallen into what is probably going to be a starting job. Yes, he still has to beat out Jack Miller III, but I don't know about you guys. I'm not bought in on Jack. And it's not that I'm like, oh, I'm so out on him. I'm not bought in on Jack. I'm not fully bought in on Graham Mertz. I will say that whether or not Graham Mertz is great or not, I feel confident saying that Graham Mertz is going to be better with the Florida Gators than he was with the Wisconsin Badgers. And I've been saying that since he came in, where I'm like, look, is Graham Mertz great? No, but he is not as bad as he's been, I'll say, as people have said, specifically Gators fans have said about him. He is not nearly as bad as what some people are saying on social media. He's also coming to a way more modern offense in Florida. And I know that there's a lot of Gators fans that hate the Florida Gators offensive scheme, whether it's the condensed sets, whether it's the 12 personnel, whatever it is. I know there are a lot of Gators fans that hate this Florida Gators scheme. It is not nearly as bad as y'all are making it seem. And I do think that the Florida Gators offense in 2023 will look better than the Florida Gators offense in 2022, primarily because Graham Mertz is not going to be ripping off these 80-yard touchdown runs, 60-yard touchdown run, 40-yard touchdown run, whatever it is. Graham Mertz ain't going to do that. If he does, I'd be amazed. That would be really cool to see, considering how everybody's saying that he's not going to. But he's probably not going to. But he will more likely than not, I'll say, do the little things better than Anthony Richardson did. And that's not even saying Anthony Richardson's bad, but there were so many simple mistakes that Anthony Richardson made that I believe Graham Mertz will not make. There are also plays that Anthony Richardson made that Graham Mertz cannot make. And that's one of the things where Graham Mertz is awareness-wise, IQ-wise, whatever you want to say, mentally better than Anthony Richardson, but he's not nearly physically as good. And it's a lot easier to get, or not a lot easier, but it's easier to get mentally up to speed than it is to get physically, because you're physically capped at certain points. So Graham Mertz, I think, will make this Florida Gators offense run more efficiently than Anthony Richardson did, primarily because he'll be able to make these simple passes with proper placement. I'll say Anthony Richardson had a few just times where it was just so bad. Like the pick six against Kentucky on the curl route that was just nowhere near where it should have been. Stuff like that hopefully won't happen anymore. But again, you now also trade off and lose the big play rushing ability that Anthony Richardson brought to the table. Another big reason that Graham Mertz is one of the winners here is that the Florida Gators skill position group, I think, is better than it was in 2022. You lost Justin Shorter, and that sucks. You lost Dejon Reynolds, and he had potential. You lost, we'll say, Trent and Creed, I guess, Whitmore. And obviously, you don't want to lose anybody. But you retained Ricky Pearsall, who is the most talented receiver in this room last year. You still have two great running backs, and now they've got more experience under their belt. Granted, there's a slightly worse offensive line, or probably considerably worse offensive line, but you're also going to have way more dynamic playmakers. Look, I like Dejon Reynolds. I don't care whatever is going on with him and Gators fans on Twitter. I like Dejon Reynolds as a football player. I think he's a very clean route runner. He got open consistently. And I like that. Even though he's slow, he got open consistently. And I'd rather have someone who's slow and gets open than someone who's fast and doesn't, right? Okay, then. But you will have more dynamic playmakers here with guys like Eugene Wilson III, with guys like Andy Jean, with burners like Aiden Mizell. You're going to have a more dynamic group of pass catchers with Graham Mertz than you had with Anthony Richardson. That's another way that you're going to go, okay, Anthony Richardson created these big plays with his legs. If Graham Mertz can just get the ball to the receiver with room to run and you have a more dynamic group, hello, you can create bigger plays in the passing game than you created with Anthony Richardson, and you take that 10 times out of 10, I think, at least. So, and also, I'm not saying I'd rather have Graham Mertz than Anthony Richardson. I'm saying that if I have to trade off mobility for more precise passes that lead to more yards after catch, I'm down for it, because why not, right? I just think I'd prefer that. But I think Graham Mertz is probably the biggest winner. Also, because Jaden Rashada fell out of Florida's recruiting class. So guess what? There's no freshman quarterback that we were like, oh, when he could start this year. That's not happening anymore in 2023. There's not that. He's also a big winner because Max Brown is playing baseball. So for spring practices, Max Brown's probably not going to be there for a large portion of it, which means there's even less quarterback competition for Graham Mertz. It's Graham Mertz and Jack Miller, and that's it for really who's competing for this spot. I'm not saying Max Brown is going to be in the running. I'm not saying Jaden Rashada is going to be in the running. But now we know they aren't, and that's a big advantage if you're one of these quarterbacks that's competing for a starting job. So another big win. We're about to talk about two defensive players who I think picked up big wins through just surviving this offseason as a Florida Gator. But first, today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by LinkedIn. As the sun comes out and small businesses are back in business, LinkedIn Jobs makes it easier for you to grow your team. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the people that you want to interview faster and for free. Post your job for free with linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. With simple tools like screening questions, it makes it easier for you to focus on candidates with just the right skills and just the right experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and potentially hire. And every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn. So if you're looking for someone to hire, LinkedIn's probably a good place to start. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. And looking to the defensive side of the ball for some winners, there's two players that I think picked up the biggest wins from this offseason on the Florida Gators side. And starting off with the biggest winner on defense, it's got to be Miguel Mitchell, I think. Personally, I think it's Miguel Mitchell. You can say it's Shamar James because Amari Burney's gone, Ventrell Miller's gone, and he's going to get that playing time. Sure. Nobody is benefiting as much as Miguel Mitchell. Miguel Mitchell in 2022 was listed as a safety, and he played both safety and star at different points, mostly star. Looking at the safety room, Trey Dean and Rashad Torrance are both gone. Trey Dean's out of eligibility going to the NFL. Rashad Torrance declared for the draft earlier than he should have. That's just my take on it, is that he should have come back for another year or transferred, but he's not NFL ready, in my opinion. So Trey Dean and Rashad Torrance are headed to the NFL. Corey Collier, Donovan McMillan transferred out of Gainesville, and they were in that safety room. And Donovan McMillan was thought of as kind of the next man up. Like, it was like, okay, Kamari Wilson and Donovan McMillan next year. Can't wait for it. And then Donovan McMillan left. So now, guess what? Miguel Mitchell, you're up there too. So there's another, we'll say there's more availability at safety for Miguel Mitchell to contribute. Looking at star, where Miguel Mitchell also played, Trevez Johnson transferred to Missouri. Kamar Wilcoxon transferred to Temple, I believe. Corey Collier is Nebraska, and Donovan McMillan is Pitt with Dejon Reynolds. But Trevez Johnson and Kamar Wilcoxon transferred out. So star, they're gone. They were two of the three guys on the depth chart. And look, Jadarius Perkins seems like a very nice guy. He does, just based on how he's presented himself since he got to Gainesville. He seems like a very nice guy. Seems very like he seems like he loves his family a lot. He is not an SEC starter quality star player. He's just not. Miguel Mitchell might not be either. But I feel like I know Jadarius Perkins isn't, and I care more about that. And look, Miguel Mitchell is not guaranteed a starting spot by any stretch. You've got a ton of talented DBs that are coming into this room right now from high school. You got Jakeem Jackson, Dejon Johnson, Jordan Castell. You've got a bunch of players that are coming into this room right now and ready to contribute and ready to compete, right? Yes. But none of them have been with this program for a year like Miguel Mitchell has. None of them have played SEC football before like Miguel Mitchell has. And clearly, this coaching staff likes Miguel Mitchell, that he got significant playing time at certain points down the stretch. Coaching staff clearly likes him. Whether he plays star or safety, there are 3 starting spots open between the safety spots and star. We can reasonably assume that Kamari Wilson will be starting at one of these safety spots. Yeah, we can reasonably assume that and feel good about that assumption. But that still leaves 2 open spots, one at each position that Miguel Mitchell can play. Will that help him? Will it hurt him? Will he be, a guy that is kind of hindered by not having a true position that he's going to play in this defense? Maybe. Will he be helped because he helps add so much versatility to your defense with what you want to do, whether you want to have him deep in the defensive backfield, whether you want to have him right up on the line of scrimmage to the star, or whatever you want to do, you have that option there. And that's another big thing where he's a good defensive fit. He's versatile. He's got experience at this point. Not much, but he's got more experience than all the other freshmen that are coming in. He is, I think, going to get significant playing time, whether or not he's a starter. That instantly makes him a big winner for me. You had maybe, we'll say 5, maybe 6 guys ahead of you, because we know that it was Corey Collier and Donovan McMillan at least ahead of him at safety. We know Trey Dean and Rashad Torrance were ahead of him at safety. We know Trevez Johnson was ahead of him at star. And we can say he was level with Kamar Wilcoxon at star. And they're all gone. That opens up a lot of space for you. The only guy that is clearly ahead of you on the depth chart is at safety, Kamari Wilson. And we can reasonably assume that at star, Jadarius Perkins has a leg up right now. But we'll see what happens throughout the spring and throughout the fall and summer. And we'll see what happens. But Miguel Mitchell's a big winner from this offseason. And another big winner on the defensive side of the ball is Chris McClellan, defensive lineman. Adding Cameron Jackson and Caleb Banks from the transfer portal means that there's more veteran presence in that group that can kind of help Chris McClellan get along the way. Cam Jackson, sure, not a great pass rusher, but Cam Jackson can give you those little pointers that Chris McClellan could use as a very young defensive tackle who is very talented, but Cam Jackson is still an all-conference player. Again, I don't care that it's the American. He's an all-conference player. So Chris McClellan gets that benefit of veteran leadership. Also, adding in Cameron Jackson, Caleb Banks, adding in all of these young freshmen to this defensive line group helps Chris McClellan a lot. It allows him to kind of carve out a role, we'll say, where Similar to how I was talking about Miguel Mitchell, where I'm like, look, whether or not he's a starter or a backup, he's going to play significant snaps. I feel the same way about Chris McClellan. I think Chris McClellan is maybe the most talented interior defensive lineman on this team. But guess what? He is also one of the few, if not the only interior defensive lineman that could line up at the 3 tech, which is right outside the shoulder of the guard. So it's going to be that pass rushing type D tackle, or the 1 tech, which is that nose tackle, 0 or 1 tech, we'll say, which is that nose tackle that Desmond Watson plays. So if Chris McClellan is going to be a backup, but he could play both of those spots, and it's like, okay, well, guess what? I'm coming in for Desmond Watson right now, and then when he's ready to come back in, I'm just shifting over to the 3 tech, and whoever's the 3 tech is getting out, and Desmond Watson gets to come in, and then now it's both me and Big Des in the interior. Or if you want to have more of a pass rushing group, then yeah, go Chris McClellan at the 0 or the 1, the nose tackle, whatever it is, and then have, anybody at the 3 tech. So, or you can just start Chris McClellan at probably 3 tech. I think he could start at the 1 tech, but I think that you keep playing Desmond Watson. So I think Chris McClellan, you could start at the 3 tech next to Desmond Watson. And guess what? That's a big group to try to run that ball into. You're running right into the teeth of 2 big dudes. So guess what? You're not going to have a good time when you do that. So yeah, I'm going to walk here and I'm going to say, Chris McClellan, whether or not you start or are just a heavily rotational piece, you are a winner from this offseason in Gainesville. We're about to wrap up by talking about the final 2 players here, 2 offensive players, 2 young offensive players that I think are winners from this offseason. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. To wrap up today's show, we're talking about 2 offensive players here that are winners here. I didn't put an offensive lineman because the offensive line right now, not a lot of winners. They're not. They're probably the group that regressed the absolute most from this offseason. But you look at tight end, Arliss Boardingham has to be a winner for you here. He just has to be, because every tight end that is on roster right now, or almost every tight end that is on roster right now, is thought of more of a blocking type. Keon Zipper is a pass catcher, sure. Jonathan Odom is a pass catcher, but he's more of a blocker. Okay? That's what he is. Then that's not a knock on him. Like, that's a fantastic role to play in this offense. You look at everybody ahead of Arliss, most of them are blockers. I don't think any of them, whether you're thought of as a blocking tight end or whether you're thought of as a pass catching tight end, I don't think any of them are as athletic or versatile as Arliss Boardingham. Arliss might be the worst blocker of the group. We haven't really seen him, but he might be the worst blocker of the group. But he is probably the most dynamic playmaker at tight end. And if he sees playing time, if he stays healthy, he could likely contribute to this passing attack that really lacked production from tight ends. Put Keon Zipper at that blocking tight end role and have Arliss Boardingham as more of the pass catcher move tight end, and just have them both out there and say, yeah, we're sacrificing a bit of blocking here, but we're picking up a lot of potential with pass catchers and pass production from our tight ends. And that's a trade-off that you might like. Nick Elksnis and Griffin McDowell left the tight end room this past offseason. You struck out on Jaden Platt, which, as much as that sucks that you struck out on Jaden Platt, that's a benefit for Arliss Boardingham. Arliss Boardingham picked up a big win this offseason by just being here. That's all that is. He's just being here. And he's thought of as a wide receiver tight end that's like not really thought of as a Kyle Pitts type, but he's still thought of as a wide receiver tight end hybrid. It's weird because, like, you also don't really consider Kyle Pitts and Travis Kelce the same type, but they're both the wide receiver tight end type. And say whatever you want about Travis Kelce, that man saw a lower percentage of his snaps at inline tight end compared to Taysom Hill. So Taysom Hill is more of a tight end than Travis Kelce is. I'll say that. Big slot receiver, which is great. He's great at it, but he's not. We'll say that. That's my take on Travis Kelce, as dope as he is. Anyway, to circle back, that's probably more the role that you can see Arliss Boardingham in. You know, the one where you go, he's not really a tight end. He's like a slot receiver. That same thing, where you won't see Keon Zipper do that because Keon Zipper is not shifty enough. But Arliss Boardingham could have that wiggle. On the other side of who's a big winner from this offseason on the offensive side of the ball, it's running back Treyon Webb. I know that there are a lot of people, myself included, who do not expect Trayon Webb to contribute as a freshman, and that should be the expectation. But Naquan Wright is at UCF, right? UCF or USF? Is that one of them? USF, I think it is. Naquan Wright is at USF. Lorenzo Lingard is at Akron. They both have left the program. They are not Florida Gators. They are no longer in the running back room, right? Luckily, you replace them with no one. The only running back addition to this running back room is Trayon Webb. He's the only one there. So that's an instant big win for him. So Naquan Wright is at USF. I just double checked. But that's an instant big win for Trayon Webb. No running backs came in. Your third and fourth running backs left the program. Running back 3 is wide open right now in this Florida Gators room. Yeah, Florida is probably bringing in a portal running back, an experienced portal running back to be running back 3. But until then, Trayon Webb's in the conversation for running back 3. And that's something that we did not expect and we were not anticipating. So for him to be in a position where he could possibly contribute early on, because again, no matter who running back 3 is, it's mostly going to be Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne as the main ball carriers. But no matter who running back 3 is, if it's Trayon Webb, you're going to see some playing time at some point in time during 2023. So that's automatically a big win to even be in that position right now as we're in first transfer portal windows over. So now we're in spring session. You've got a chance to maybe change Florida's mind. Maybe this coaching staff is like, yeah, we want to bring in a veteran running back 3, but you show up and you ball out early on. Maybe they're like, oh, maybe we don't need it. Maybe we have a guy who's ready. We just had a freshman last year who was a great running back and ready to contribute. Maybe we have that again, but this time it's Trayon Webb. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Florida Gators football. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC, hosted by Chris Gordy of Sports 790. Get the best coverage on the best conference, including the best university, the University of Florida. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olson. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find my written work with Whole 9 Sports and Giants Country of SI.com. And I will see you all tomorrow.